in the first part of What Men Want, I provided what I thought was a very simple ABCD guide to what men want and how we choose our mates. What I would like to do in this second session is to try and separate men into two groups and to try and identify specifically what qualities men are looking for depending on what group that they fall into. Now, to make things easy to remember, let me begin with an explanation of what the groups really are all about. Now, when I do my classes and I speak to men, I make a point of trying to separate men into three groups. The first group I call my preschool, and these are men 18 years or less. The second group is 18 years up to 35 years. I call this group my undergraduate students. This is my focus group. The third group are men from 35 years and above. Interestingly, the second group and the first group are usually those who I speak to. And the reason is simply because if you're 18 years and below, I think most of the advice should be coming from your father. In any case, a lot of the advice is still applicable even if you're less than 18 years old. Now, in the first part, I talked about what men want. And I said in very, very simple terms, it comes down to three things. They all begin with the word or the letter S. Sex, serenity, and servanthood. But I made the point of trying to emphasize that not all men want the same thing. And all men are not the same. But in the majority, there is a consensus, irrespective of what group the man falls into. And what I would like to do in this second part, or second session, is provide some clarity on what men want based on what age group they fall into. Now, I have to apologize because the first group is the group I will not focus on. I'm going to focus on the second group and the third, because this is adults. In choosing a spouse or choosing a mate, I gave 8 different things that men look for. They all started with a letter. I used a simple analogy, having read a book many years ago, which was called All I Need to Know, I Learned in Kindergarten. And so I used the idea of using ABCD as a useful way of remembering what we look for. Now, one of the reasons I decided to make it this simple is because in my interactions with a lot of women, especially the women who are starting to mature into their womanhood, I'm talking about women who are 25 years and above. One of the things I keep hearing is, I'm a strong, educated, independent woman. And when men hear such words, we head for the hills. And nothing turns off a man like those words. It doesn't mean we don't want you to be and to have all of such qualities, but those are not qualities that we look for when choosing a mate. And so I broke it down in a simple way, very quickly. A is your age. B is your beauty. C is your character. D is your dedication. E is your education. F is your family line, your familial lineage or bond. G is your growth, and I is inspiration. 8 very simple things that we use as a prerequisite to choosing a mate. Now let me go into each of those, because what I'd like to do is bring those 8 items into what I call 3 specific headings. Most women, especially working women, usually say, I have a good job, I make good money, I earn X amount of money, I work for this company or that company, I live in this place, I can afford X. And in many ways, they tend to think that what they've been able to accumulate in resources will be considered by men when we make our decision. Nothing can be further from the truth than the concept that we judge your worth to us based on the value you bring on an economic basis. Now, before I come back to those 8 specific items, let me share what I think is an important set of baskets to think about how we judge a woman's value. There are 4. The first is what I call your reproductive fertility value, RFV. The second is your sexual marketplace value, your SMV. The third is your non-sexual marketplace value. And the fourth is your economic intrinsic value. Now, with those baskets, I'd like you to see how each of the 8 items I made reference to, how each of those items are selected and inserted in each of the 4 baskets. Now let's begin with the first, age. When we talk about your age, most men are really concerned over the long term. When we look at your age, we're thinking about fertility. We're thinking about how fertile you are. Now, every woman has a biological clock, the same way that every man has a biological clock. The biological clock is linked to her fertility. So for men who want to have families or want to have a family, we're thinking about your ability to reproduce for us. The quality of eggs a woman has and the quantity of eggs she has depreciates or deteriorates with age. From 35, at the end of 35 years, in other words from 36, women go into what we call high-risk pregnancy, which is when there is risk to the baby's life and risk to the mother's life, primarily because the quality of eggs and the quantity of eggs have declined. So, number 1 is age, and intrinsically linked to age is fertility. The age of fertility selection fits very nicely in what we call the basket number 1, your RFV, your reproductive fertility value. The second is beauty. Men are visual by nature. We are attracted to beauty. We see you first before we feel you. In other words, a man is first attracted to your attractiveness before he decides to commit to you. Generally, when we date with a specific intent of sex. But sex has a conditional requirement. We must find you attractive in order to want to have sex with you. So beauty is perhaps the most important selection criteria for men. Irrespective of age, men choose women first by what they see. And there are derivatives of beauty. One could be your height to waist ratio, your youth in terms of the plumpness of your skin, the elasticity of your texture of your skin, the length of your hair, the shape of your body. There are several shapes, but we also look at your face, your teeth, your eyes. Whether you meet, in most men's eyes, what we would consider to be beautiful. Beauty is linked to the basket number 2, which is your sexual marketplace value. Simply meaning, if there were 10 men stood next to me as I speak, and we had 10 women on stage, each of us would rank the women individually, giving them different scores. But there will be a consistency in what we score certain women. Some women will be scored very high, some will be scored average, and some will be scored low. The score you get is your value in the marketplace, because it means on the aggregate, society or that culture have decided over a long period of time what they believe to be beautiful. Now, beauty is subjective, I accept, but there are objective standards of beauty. Make no mistake, men are also judged on their looks. Women find certain things in men attractive, just like men find certain things in women attractive. Now, we don't have to go into how that beauty is scored, because it varies depending on where you are in the world. But there is a consensus amongst men in a specific location or across the world on what they consider to be beautiful. So age goes into your reproductive fertility value bucket. Beauty goes into your sexual marketplace bucket. Now, this leaves 6 other items: character, dedication, education, family, growth, and inspiration. Interestingly, all of those are qualities that a woman has which are not inherent, which are not incidental to who she is. In many ways, you're born, you don't get to choose when you're born. Your beauty, most of the time, in terms of your face, your genetics, is something that you're gifted. Yes, you have some control over your body, training hard, eating well, and looking after your physical body. But in terms of your face and the symmetry of your face, for most people, that is incidental to who we are. However, character, dedication, education, family, growth, and inspiration is something you can cultivate, with the exception of family. In other words, you're born into the family you have. And for most of your life, your experiences are simply a product of your environment and your upbringing. In any case, the basket that I call your non-sexual marketplace value is where all of these other items, these other 6 selection criteria, are put into. Now, what that means is character, dedication, education, family, growth, inspiration all fit into your non-sexual marketplace value. And really, you could also say that that basket could be called your attitude, your personality, your mannerisms, your temperament, how feminine you are as a woman, whether you have any of the traditional values that women once had. And what that means is that the 8 items I've shared so far have fit perfectly in 3 of the 4 buckets, and 1 remains empty. Can you guess which one is empty? Well, it's your economic intrinsic value, your EIV. I haven't explained what that means, but your EIV is simply your ability to produce and create wealth. It's simply your human capital, which you convert to financial capital, which you convert to real estate, which you convert 2, any form of financial wealth or your ability to generate income through human capital. In other words, whatever skill you've acquired through education, whatever job you have, whatever career you have, has enabled you to have a platform where you're compensated for what you bring in value to that company, for which you're compensated in monetary terms. So your wealth, the money you have, or the money you're about to inherit or will inherit from your father, your parents, your family, fits nicely in your EIV bucket. Unfortunately, men generally do not look to that bucket in making a selection. 90% of the decisions we make in terms of choosing a mate will come down to these 8 preconditions. Yes, there are several more, just like there are several other characters in the alphabet. But if you can get the top 8 correctly, then you position yourself in a very good position to be selected, to be chosen, or to be admired. Perhaps the word chosen is not the right word. Maybe to come into agreement with a man. Now, having explained all of that, I go back to the groups that I mentioned initially. Preschool, 18 years and younger, undergraduate, 18 to 35, and postgraduate, 35 and above. We put aside the first group and we focus on the 2 groups. 18 to 35, what do men want? Well, usually men who are between 18 and 35, if you follow my tenets, if you follow my principles, if you follow my teachings, I simply suggest and encourage men to focus primarily on their dreams and their goals. 95% of their time should be focused on becoming their best version of themselves. Education, career, creating wealth, pursuing their passion, finding their purpose, manifesting their destiny, until they get to 35. And once they've turned 35 and have achieved their goals, they can start to make allowances for intimate relationships and a family or settling down, etc. Now, what this simply means is that if you're between 18 and 35, most men in that group simply focus on B, beauty, or bucket number 2, which is your sexual marketplace value. That is primarily what they look at. Now, I should admit that age generally matters. An 18-year-old boy generally would want to be have sexual relations with an 18-year-old woman, but he will settle for whatever he can get. So generally, it's about sex. He doesn't care too much about reproducing. Ideally, if he followed my principles, he doesn't want to reproduce. So technically, your reproductive fertility value makes no difference to him. And your non-sexual marketplace value, character, dedication, education, family, growth, inspiration, means absolutely nothing to him, because all he wants is sex. And he wants to get sex at the cheapest price, effectively pay nothing, because he has only 5% of his time to dedicate to relationships. So he wants to get in as fast as he can and get out as fast as he can. However, for men who are 35 and above, they have had 18 years to play the game of pursuing their dreams and having their fair share of women, and therefore they're thinking in a different and through a different set of lens and perspective. These are the men who take into account the 3 buckets: your RFV, your SMV, and your NSMV. In other words, they take into consideration 8 of the items I've shared today, whereas those who are between 18 and 35, if they followed my teachings, would only focus on item number 2, which is your beauty. But generally, and here is the great thing, I'm relatively obscure. So most people don't know who I am, and therefore most men don't really understand what my tenets are, which means that there's really no difference in the greater scheme of things where men are between group number 2 and group number 3, because most men in group number 2 are not following my principles, which means usually they want beauty, and if they can get beauty and they can have a relationship with a woman, they generally want to keep the woman, which means they would look into other aspects such as your age, your character, how dedicated you are to them, how educated you are, your family, because they want to and they believe they will have a committed, long-term, fruitful relationship with you. They think about your growth because they want to be your partner, and they're thinking about whether you're inspiring. So what that means, if you eliminate Mensa from the picture, there's really no difference between group number 2 and group number 3. On the aggregate, men make the same selective decisions in a consistent manner. We want age, or we look to your age, your beauty, your character, your dedication, your education, your family and your family lineage, your growth and your inspiration, which means there are 3 buckets that we're hoping to have our fill: your reproductive fertility value, your non-sexual marketplace value, and your sexual marketplace value. The best advice I can give women, especially women between 18 and above, and especially women who are approaching 30 years, or who are over 30, is to focus less on your intrinsic economic value or your economic intrinsic value. Focus less on what you have as a job in terms of resources that you bring to the table. Focus less on how much wealth you have or how much money you make or where you live and all of the financial resources that are in your disposal. Because most men do not care, or let me rephrase, with apologies, men of means, men who've achieved their dreams and goals, men who are educated, competent, assertive, men who have fame, power, money, influence, men of a certain social class seldom care about your money, because they have been raised to recognize that one of the most important responsibilities is provision. It's in a man and it's in our nature to work. We derive joy from working, but even more importantly, we derive a sense of purpose from the responsibility of knowing that we can provide for someone we love or we care for. If the person can support in that process, great. But we generally do not come in to the picture thinking that we will choose you based on your ability to provide equally as we are. Now, I hope that's been useful. Again, think about this from the basic point of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. Very simple. I hope that's been useful.